Hi, this is Marsha.
And this is Kelly.
We are the 2U's of 2U's Fiber Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at 2usfiberadventures.com.
And we invite you to join our 2U's Fiber Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am Better in Motion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode.
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly, and I hope you are enjoying your spring. It's beautiful here. It was warmer a few days ago than it is today, but the sun's out, and it's looking quite spring-like here in California. Meanwhile, our intrepid fiber adventurers are continuing their trip in Scotland, and we have a few more dispatches from our foreign correspondents today. There is one segment where they are recording outside, and so there are some times during the recording where there's quite a bit of wind noise. So I just wanted to alert you to that. It does not continue for the entire rest of the episode, so if you need to, you can just skip ahead a little bit or just listen and know that it's not going to be continuing to be that wind noise for the rest of the episode.
Hello, this is Kim.
It's Marsha. If we sound a little worse for wear, it's because we are, right?
Unfortunately.
Yes. So we went on Thursday, was the first day of the Yarn Fest, and we went both Thursday and Friday. But we arrived on Thursday and feeling good, and got in, and we're standing in the first booth, and I'm thinking to myself, I am not feeling good. And then I talked to Kim, and she said she was not feeling good. And so we've had a visit from Montezuma.
Montezuma's Revenge visited us.
Yes, and so we spent both Thursday and Friday at the Edinburgh Yarn Fest. It was difficult because we were feeling so bad.
And it was super crowded.
Super crowded, which it was hard to deal with the crowds because we were not feeling good. But anyway, we went Thursday, and it's very cool. It was lots of interesting yarn. The first booth that we went to was a booth that was selling Shetland wool, and Kim bought, there was a free pattern that you could pick up.
Yes.
And she picked up the pattern, and it turns out the name, it was the Shetland Wool Week hat pattern. And who's the designer? It's
Elizabeth Johnson.
Elizabeth Johnson, and it's her booth. So what was really nice is you bought some Shetland wool, and you're sitting here right now, and this, I should say, is Sunday.
Yes.
Sunday evening. And this is our last night in the hotel, but Kim is sitting here. She's got all of the yarn wound into balls, and she's cast on for the hat. And I would say what I thought was really nice about what she did is she had the yarn measured out, the main color yarn for the hat, and then all these different colors in just the amount that you needed for the hat. So you didn't have to buy a huge skein.
That was Elizabeth Johnston. And what was really special is she was there in the booth with her sister selling her yarn. And they were very personable and, can I help you? And the selection was just right to make these hats that she had written this pattern for. Yeah. And you could also, the yarn, she wrote the pattern so that you could use Jamison's and Smith and Jamison's or Uradell yarns. But hers were the only one that you just needed to buy just enough to do the hat.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got the gray is the base, and then you've got kind of a pumpkin color, kind of a natural cream, kind of a sage green, and
purple.
Purple, or is that more of a burgundy, would you say? Or?
No, I would say it's more like aubergine.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, Kim's knitting on that. And let's see, what else did we see?
The little gray sheep.
The little gray sheep was very nice, and I was excited because they had Gotland sheep.
Yes.
Or Gotland yarn. I ended up buying some.
Well, and they had it in 3 weights. They had it in, I'm pretty sure, DK, fingering, and lace weight. And the woman who runs Gray Sheep with her family.
They're her sheep.
They're her sheep.
Yeah.
And then she has a person that she works with who processes all the yarns, and then she dyes them. And so the dyes and the colors were pretty special.
Yeah, they were really nice. Well, she was very helpful, too,
Yes.
explaining about the yarns, and Kim bought, 4 skeins, I think?
Yeah, I did.
To make a shawl, and I bought a little bit more to make a sweater. I should back up and say, too, that one of the booths that we went to is, I'm drawing a blank, Kim, on her name.
Marie Walliner.
Yes. Wallen, yes, Marie Wallen. And so we went by her booth, and Kim wanted to go by her booth because you're making the Lerwick cardigan, and you actually purchased it as a kit from Marie Wallen, and so you wanted to go by and talk to her.
Yes.
And so we were standing in the booth, and I'm looking at a Fair Isle that I thought was gorgeous.
Yes.
Love the colors.
The color palette. Marie's color palette is really pretty exceptional. She puts things together that you just don't think will work, and then when you are knitting them, you're like, wow, that's interesting combination of colors.
Yeah. And so the colors I bought, some of them I would never buy.
So back up.
Oh.
So what happened was she had a pattern, and we saw the sweater, and we went, oh, that's a really nice.
I love the colors. And then her woman who was helping her in the booth said it was Gotland yarn. I'm like,
Yes.
I remember that yarn.
Yeah.
So we went back to the Little Gray Sheep, and I bought Gotland yarn to make the sweater. So it's going to be my first foray into Fair Isle.
But it's not technically Fair Isle because you're knitting it in pieces, aren't you?
Well, isn't Fair Isle the color work?
color
The color work?
Yeah, it's not going to be in the round, though.
No, it's not going to be in the round, and Kim and I were talking about it, that we think perhaps the reason it's not in the round is that Gotland is a more slick yarn, and it may not stand up to being steeped.
Yeah.
But I thought Fair Isle was the color
I think
pattern.
you're right. It is a color pattern, the look.
The look. Okay.
Of mixing multiple colors per row.
But this is going to be interesting because it's the Gotland yarn, and so it'll be a cardigan. So I got all of that yarn. So it was nice talking to them in the booth. One thing I will say about this Yarn Fest is it was so crowded. It was difficult to even get into booths to shop. But I think at Little Gray Sheep, we just kind of forced our way. There wasn't, when we first got there was not too many people in the booth, and then more and more people wanted to get in, but we kind of held our ground because we had to figure out the colors for the sweater.
But in many booths, you could not even step in.
And I went by, there's the French one.
La Bien Amie.
Right, and I went by 6 or 7 times, and I could never, it was a corner booth, and so the yarn was on 2 sides, and there was always at least 3 people deep.
Yes.
I never got in to even touch the yarn or anything.
Yeah.
And then Stephen West has his own Stephen and Penelope yarn, and the same thing. I couldn't get into the booth there either because I thought I didn't know I would buy any, but I wanted to look at it. And so I think we kind of ended up shopping booths we could get into.
Somewhat. We were very direct because one of the things you had asked is, was there any place I just had to go? And I had been watching Woolly Originals on Instagram, and I just really loved her project bags. And I like that she uses Jameson's yarn and Scottish linen for the linings. And so I wanted to go see her bags in person.
And we should just describe the bags. What she does is she takes Jameson wool and she machine knits the fabric for the outside of the bag and then uses Scottish linen on the inside of the bag.
Correct. And the motifs that she uses are very Nordic or Scottish.
Yeah.
And so they are special to this area.
Yeah. So we each got bags and then we each got some Gotland.
Yes.
And you didn't buy anything else? The Shetland for your hat, but you didn't buy anything else, did you?
Mm-mm.
No. You bought knitting needles.
Well, yeah, they're actually really fun, pointy colored needles. They're the Knit Pro Zing, and they're bright aluminum needles with nice points. I haven't tried them before.
Yeah. The other thing that was nice about the festival is they had a marquee set up, which held about 500 people. And that was because we were not feeling good. It was kind of nice. We just sat there and had ginger ale and tea, trying to sort of feel better. But it was nice talking to people.
It was a wonderful environment to just see all the fascinating sweaters walking around. And it wasn't a buying situation. You could just sit and relax at these big round tables. And there were many groups of people that were joining and, coming and going. And so that was a fun.
Yeah, that was fun. And it was just about the sweaters. I was really just amazed at how many color work sweaters there were, and people making, there was groups of women that had all made the same pattern, and they were all wearing them. And so if you look on Instagram, you can find, photographs of people in the same sweater. There was also, I sat at a table, I think you were shopping, but I sat at a table with a young couple that had a baby, and they'd all made, and I don't remember the name of the sweater, but it's the Stephen West sweater that's kind of off-kilter. So one sleeve is kind of short, but you've got all this fabric underneath the arm, and then the other sleeve is like a normal sleeve. The husband had one on, the wife had one, and even the baby, it was like a less than a year old baby, had one of these sweaters on. It was so funny. And actually, they have their photograph on Instagram with Stephen West. But just the amazing color work. I've not seen so much when I went to Stitches West. Not as much color work. Not the sheer number.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was fun, but we were a little fried. I don't know that we fully took advantage of it the way we would have liked to have taken advantage of it, given that we were subpar at best.
At best, yeah.
And
because we both got ill there.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that we were going to get ill. And it was like, now how do you get home?
Yeah, we'd gone out to a nice dinner the night before, and then we were fine in the morning, and then we're out there, and I'm like walking around thinking to myself, I feel bad. You know that thing, you just don't know what's wrong, but you feel weird. And so now this is Sunday. Kim had lunch.
Yeah, I did exercise this morning. I went to a gyrokinesis class in Edinburgh. And that just made me feel much, much better.
Yeah. I did not go. I laid in bed. Then...
You actually got the Pepto-Bismol.
Yes, that's true. I walked down to Boots and got Pepto-Bismol, which is interesting. They keep it behind the counter.
We kept thinking this was only going to be a 24-hour thing.
Yes. And it's gone on longer. So I don't know what's going on, but Kim you were able to eat lunch today, but I didn't eat lunch today. I sat with you, and I tried bread, but that didn't stay down. So... I'm just now on I will say one thing that's kind of funny is that it was yesterday, we had lunch, our first meal was a lunch at the National Gallery, and we decided it was the wrong choice. They said it was a sandwich with chicken with sauce, and we finally realized that sauce here means mayonnaise.
Thick.
That's really not the best thing for us to eat after being sick. And then we had a cup of some sort of squash soup that was a cream base. And then they said it came with some salmon pate that was in cream cheese. So all totally the wrong stuff for us to eat. So we weren't feeling great, but we walked around. We went to St. Giles Cathedral.
That was fun.
It was beautiful. And we saw the Thistle Chapel, which is this very, very charming little chapel. And then we went, it took us forever to find it, but we finally found the Scotsman, the hotel, and we sat in the bar. And I had a beer, and my stomach felt better last night. We had dinner, and in the middle of the night, both of us started feeling bad in the middle of the night. But today at lunch, I just had some bread and ginger ale. But the waiter said, "Oh, you should have some beer," because apparently the good bacteria that's in beer can help your stomach. So we are now sitting in the room, and we split a
big Stella
Artois.
Yeah.
We split one of those, and I'm feeling better. We've had a little bit of pita bread. But the other thing I would say, too, Kim, we have to just mention, since we have been on our backs, flat in bed, propped up in bed, knitting, and watching Scottish television.
Yes.
And we found some programs that we really like. One is, what's it called? Shed and
Buried.
Shed and Buried, about these two guys who just go around. I think there was one like this in the United States, where they go around and find warehouses and sheds that people are hoarding stuff. And they're very, very funny. We enjoy that. And then the one, I don't think we've laughed so hard ever, is this one called Gogglebox.
Yes.
And it just seems to be, this is the premise of it, is they film people watching TV and making comments about the TV shows that I think must have aired the week before or something. I don't know.
Or the same week.
Oh my God, it's such a ridiculous show, but so funny. We laugh so hard. Yes. And then the other thing too, Kim, I cannot believe this, but last night we watched Bruce Lee Entered the Dragon. And we stayed up till I think 11 o'clock or midnight watching Enter the Dragon. So it's been an interesting few days here.
Yeah, because I don't really watch regular TV. I only watch Netflix at home. So this is, and the commercials were both like, whoa.
They're kind of edgy.
Yes, they're very edgy and funny.
Yeah. So anyway, but today's I think that's all you need to talk about. I do apologize. We can't report more, but we were not in any shape to do much more than we did.
Yeah.
But this is our last night at the hotel in Edinburgh, and then we go to the airport tomorrow to pick up a rental car, and then we're going to go to Perth. That'll be our next stop. We'll be there for 2 days, and we'll check in after that.
So signing off.
Yeah, until we report in from Perth.
Yes.
All right, bye.
Bye.
All right, it's Marsha and Kim again, and it's Wednesday.
Yes. And we're standing beside the Tay River in Perthshire.
And on our left is the river, and on our right is a field full of sheep.
Yes. Probably about 20.
Yeah. And we're standing in the forest, and there's little white flowers. They're not crocuses. We think they're lily of the valley, but they're in full bloom. So spring is on its way, even though the trees are bare, and it's 38 degrees?
Yeah.
Cold. And it's
cold.
It's raining. So we're standing out here in the rain. So maybe we can hear birds. So hopefully on the recording, people can hear the birds in the background. But we just want to take a moment to update where we are and what we've been doing.
We're feeling much better.
Yeah, we're feeling much better. 2 days ago, we picked up the rental car in Edinburgh. We took the bus to the airport and picked up the rental car, and that was an experience in itself, just finding the rental car agency. It was kind of fun because we wanted navigation, and it turned out it was a better value to get a Mercedes-Benz with the built-in navigation. So we're driving around in a Mercedes, and it's quite the car.
We feel very classy.
Yeah, we feel classy. And I said to Kim, I think it was really good that we got that car because Kim is doing all the driving, and she's doing a really good job. But just for safety, it's good to have that much car around us.
And it was the smallest choice. The other two choices were SUVs, and I didn't really want to drive an SUV here on one-lane roads.
Yeah. And then we should also say about the navigation system, it took us a while to figure it out. We discussed, well, anyway, we won't go into the whole thing about the navigation other than to say that it took us a while to figure it out.
Yes, and we learned that everybody lives by postal codes here.
Yes, so the best thing is not to put in an address, but just put in the postal code. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we learned. The other thing we've learned about the navigation is what she's calling a street is not necessarily what the street sign says.
Or they don't match.
Yeah, they don't match. So that's been a bit of a challenge. We've made a couple of mistakes, and we've had to recalculate and get back on the road. And the other thing we've learned, too, is unlike the United States, if you miss the exit, you just go to the next one and turn around and go back. It's not quite that easy here. Yes, it's not, you just don't get off, turn around, and go back on. You have to go through some town and wind around. And anyway, but we've seen a lot because of that.
It's a scenic route.
We've had seen some beautiful things because we've gotten lost. What we did when we left Edinburgh, we went around the idea was to go along the coast.
Yes, we did.
Up to St. Andrews and then to Dundee and then up to our Perth and our hotel. And so it took us a while because of the navigation. She kept wanting to take us the fastest way as opposed to the scenic way. We finally did get to go along the coast, and we stopped in... yes, I wrote it down. Let's get it. Pittenween, and which is a cute little fishing village. And the reason we picked that to stop is there was a yarn shop there, but when we got there it was closed, which was probably just as well because we did damage later on. But anyway, and then Kim, we just walked around, right?
It was we were right on the water, so it was a fishing village and very steep hill back up. We've been hiking a lot of steep hills.
Yeah, we've been walking a lot. And even though we rode around in the car, I think we've gotten our 10,000 steps in, even though we spent a lot of the day in the car. But the other thing we should say, too, beautiful yesterday.
The last 2 days have been gorgeous.
Gorgeous sun. And we stopped. Anyway, we went to a fish and chip shop and had lunch and split an order of fish and chips. It was a combo.
With the oak smoked haddock.
So one was just regular haddock, and the other one was this oak smoked, and they put herbs in there too, I think she said, and they smoked it, and then they battered and fried it, and it sounds weird, but it was delicious.
Yeah, it had a funny yellow color, but it had so much flavor.
Yeah, it was delicious. And then peas that are kind of smashed, green peas that are smashed. It was good, and we had a ginger beer.
Oh, yeah.
And that was good. So then we got back in the car, and we drove up through St. Andrews, through Dundee. And I think around Dundee, we stopped and got directions, right? Because we could, at that point, we hadn't figured out the navigation that you need to put in the post. No, actually, I take that back. We did know we need to put in the postal code.
We hadn't saved it.
But we hadn't saved it. We learned that we needed to save it. So we stopped at a gas station to get directions, and she referred us to an auto dealership. And I have to say, everybody in Scotland is so nice, and they're so happy to help you. And anyway, I go in there, and Kim sat in the car while I went in to get directions. And while I was in getting directions, she actually figured out the navigation and how to put in how you can find the hotel. But anyway, I was in there. This nice guy said, well, I'll look it up. And he said, I know where the hotel is. And he started giving me directions, and they were like this. Well, you go out here, turn right, then you go to the road with the big tree and make a left, and you go, and when you get to a bridge, don't go over the bridge. Turn right. And I'm sitting there going, okay, sure, okay, got it. Thinking to myself, there's no way I have got any of this memorized.
Well, because there's lots of bridges and beautiful trees.
Yeah. And anyway, so then he wrote it down for me, and then he looked it up online and got the postal code for me. And then by the time I got out to the car, Kim had figured it out. But that was actually really funny. He took all that time out of his day to draw that map for me. But we got to the hotel, and we have to pronounce this correctly, Kim. Balathi. We're staying at the Balathi House Hotel, and it's an old country house.
You read the history. It's a lovely house. It's just kind of this is not a negative thing. It is so quiet here. Mm-hmm. You can see the river from our room and the field with the sheep, and it's so idyllic. And the first night we were here, there were not many people staying in the hotel, so it's a huge change from frenetic Edinburgh to countryside, and a lot of people just come here for that quiet.
And I think, there's no lights here other than they have lights shining onto the hotel to illuminate it. But if those were not on a clear night, you could see stars like crazy, I bet. It is winter, so the trees are not leafed out. I think it must be gorgeous here in the summer when there's huge rhododendrons on the property, and when those are in bloom, it must be gorgeous here. Very nice. And we do need to say something about our dinner the first night. Well,
we were the youngest people there.
And we're not that young. We were the youngest people, and it was just so... I have to say, after dinner that night, we started talking to people the next day. Yes. And people are very friendly. The other guests and the hotel staff was very friendly and very talkative. We had some nice conversation with people. But that night at dinner, it's like you're in a morgue or something. It's like you're in a library or church. Everybody's sitting there very quiet. Just always, everybody in the dining room is couples, just two people, and
you hear the clinking of silverware on plates.
You could hear people swallowing.
Yes.
It was very quiet and very awkward and weird, and you felt like you just wanted to start shouting in there or something to shake things up. I don't know. It was. The meal was very nice.
Yes, it was basically 4 courses and excellent food. And excellent service. It's just it was so eerily quiet, and everybody had their soft, hushed voices in the dining room.
Yeah. So that was strange. But as I say, the last 2 days we've been talking to people, and that night after dinner we sat in one of the sitting rooms and talked to a couple, and we had a nice conversation. And they were very warm and friendly, but they were also one of the couples sitting there with very hushed voices, not saying anything. It's just odd. Anyway.
Well, and they were funny. They were like, well, what questions do you have about driving? And Marsha said, what's this about the sign, caution, red squirrel?
No, actually the sign was just, it said, did it say red squirrels or just squirrels?
Red squirrel.
I think it just said squirrels.
Well, no, it did have a triangle above it with a big...
Well, but it just said, like, red squirrels in big type and a big, huge exclamation point. And I'm like, God, how big are these squirrels?
And like, why are they telling us about?
I think the way the sign was configured, it really looked like, and it had this huge, I mean, it had this, like, it was almost a separate sign with an exclamation point on it. And it really had this feeling that it was, well, at home you have a big sign saying deer or something. That's what you think, like, watch out for big animals. And what it turns out, they told us it was the red squirrel is endangered. So the lower half of Great Britain is gray squirrels, which were imported for hunting, I think. Isn't that what they said? I can't remember.
They're here.
They're here, they were imported, and they are not native, and they've kind of decimated the red squirrel population, and they're trying to bring that back, and so they want people to avoid hitting them. But it was a funny sign. We thought it must have been enormous. Okay, and so then the next morning, after breakfast, we drove over to Strathern Fleece and Fiber Studio, and that was quite the highlight.
Well, it was a working farm, and the wool studio was set aside from the main house, and it was a little haven to go into. It's just chock full of roving and yarn and little kits and spinning wheels and it had this wonderful light coming in, sunlight coming in. It is like the haven for people who love fiber. We're like, ooh.
I think it's everybody's dream studio.
Yes.
To have a place like that. So we saw the farm. So as Kim said, it's all of the wool from their sheep, and they do have an alpaca. And this was interesting, is that the alpaca they have is for keeping the foxes away.
Yeah.
They're kind of guard alpaca.
Yeah.
And
pets.
They're pets, but they keep
They protect the sheep from the fox.
Yeah. So that was interesting to learn. So.
And we did a little damage there.
We did a little damage. So let's tell people what you bought.
Well, the Linda, who runs the wool studio, she's the owner, is an amazing dyer. She has these really saturated colors, and both of us looked at the fuchsia and the pinks and the blues. So I got a lace weight bundle of yarn that I'll probably do a scarf out of BFL. And the way that it was processed was super soft. And then I got a little bag of roving that has little smatterings of all of her saturated color tufts. And so that'll be fun.
And are you gonna blend that in with your spin it with your other roving? Do you think?
I will probably take a solid color and then apply it with her colors.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I also bought some BFL yarn. I bought some DK and lace weight. Or, I'm sorry, it's not lace weight, it's fingering.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I also bought some roving because I had not heard of this fiber. It's called Manx, and I don't know how to pronounce this. Look, probably Loughton. It's Loughtan, and it's a beautiful kind of caramel colored brown. And I think, and I don't remember, I think I got 250 grams. And she was very nice too to put it in a plastic bag, and we tried to compress as much air out of it and tape it up so I can pack that home. So that was really a really fun stop, and kind of one of the highlights of the day, I think, is stopping at her studio.
Well, and it was fun just to be on a working farm. There's 2 huge trees on either side of the driveway, and we're like, whoa! And then getting out, we only could turn one direction, then turn around in the cemetery down the road.
Yes.
the trials and tribulations of driving in Scotland.
Yeah. So then we got back in the car, and our next stop was Stirling Castle, and we really enjoyed it. And it was interesting just driving too, because we parked in, because it's March, there's nobody here really, or very few tourists. We were able to park just in the parking lot, right?
Esplanade.
The Esplanade right at the castle.
At the foot of the castle, yeah.
So we had a little something to eat first at their cafeteria, and then we took a tour of the castle, and we really liked it.
It had beautiful grounds. The day was so sunny and clear. We could see all the 360 degrees around the castle. And just little crocuses were starting to pop out. And not too many people were in the castle, so we could see the Queen's and King's apartments with not big crowds. There were wonderful guides there in costume that wanted to explain things to you. And what we loved the most was the Marie de Guise's bedroom, the Queen's bedroom.
Yeah. And I have the thing about this castle too, which I liked, is I got a better understanding of the history, the connection of all these people, and that is it James V and Mary or Marie? She was originally Marie de Guise. Were the mother and father, parents of Mary, Queen of Scots.
Yes.
I had not made that connection, so I got that, and then the castle's really good to show what life would have been like in the castle,
because it's been brought back. It's not original to. They brought back the colors. The Historical Society has painted everything.
And apparently the original castle had all been covered with a plaster, which they called, I think,
King's Gold.
King's Gold, right? And so it was all. It's kind of a light ochre color.
Yeah,
kind of.
I think they call it the limestone. Plaster. Yeah.
And so apparently the whole palace originally, or castle, had been covered with that and changed later on. And that what they did is the one building, it's not the palace.
Great Hall.
The Great Hall, they have restored to that look. So that was interesting to see. And it is fun, too, because you can see all the way from the kitchens all the way up to the royal bedroom and see how... It does a good job of explaining what life was like living in a castle, a fortress, and a palace. So that was interesting. Now, the other thing I think we really want to talk about, though, is they have a room, a special gallery devoted to the tapestries. And originally there had been a series of, I think it was 7 or 8 tapestries telling the story of capturing the unicorn. And they had been in the Queen's bedroom. And so they started a project in, I think it was around 2000, of reweaving the famous tapestry of the unicorn chained to a pomegranate tree surrounded by a fence and then a field of mille fleurs.
Yes.
A million flowers. Is that what it
Yeah.
is? Million flowers. That was fascinating, that project.
And they had, we could go in and see little film clips of them doing the weaving and the creation of the reproduction tapestries. And what we found really interesting is that they chose, with a lot of samples, to make it from using 8 threads per centimeter to 4.
Yes,
Is that
right. The original tapestries had 8 threads per centimeter, and they chose to do 4 per centimeter because if they had gone with 8, it would have taken an extra 13 years to weave this tapestry. That kind of blew my mind. And also the new tapestry, it took 14 years to complete it. So imagine that. That would have been, what's my math? 27 years? It took them 14 years to complete it, and they said it's 10% smaller than the original one. But that blew me away. I mean, we had to actually look up a centimeter, and a centimeter is
quarter of an inch.
Around a quarter of an inch.
A little more.
A little more, yeah. And to imagine having 8 threads or knots per
quarter of an inch.
It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And I don't know how... we were just talking about it last night. How did they do that?
In daylight.
Yeah, I mean, because they had to do it in daylight because the lighting was so bad. And how many sets of eyes were damaged doing that, you know? So that was really interesting. And then they talked about how they figured out the colors to use, how they dyed all of the yarn
to match
the tapestries. And they actually went with the colors off the backs of the tapestries because they were more close to the original color because they had not been exposed to light as much as the front of the tapestries. So I have to say, I love Stirling Castle. I really love that whole room about the tapestries, just given that we like all this fibery stuff.
Well, and it was fun to see the tapestries in place as they would have been in the Queen's bedroom. They were surrounding her room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then after that, we just kind of walked around Stirling just to get a little walk in. I think that's about it. We then drove back to our hotel, the Balathi Hotel.
Yes, excellent.
Or the Balathi House Hotel. And I think we just changed our shoes and washed our hands, and then Kim ordered a pint.
Yes, I usually have a half pint, but I had been driving all day.
She'd been driving, and you did a great job at it. But even I said, even I was tired, because even though I'm not physically doing the driving, I'm doing a lot of the watching and, reminding you to stay left and watching signs, and it is confusing. It is confusing for us.
The signs and where the cars are coming from is not... it's against your an instinct of where you think they're coming from. So you have to be looking in all directions. Yeah.
But I say that everybody's so polite, and we did make some mistakes.
Yes.
Nothing dangerous, but nobody's ever honked at us. Nobody honked at us
know.
this entire 2 days of driving. So this has been a great stay.
Yeah.
It's very pretty here. So I think that's it, and we'll check in later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and Kim and I are sitting each on our beds holding a glass of Guinness.
Yeah. It was on tap here in Edinburgh.
Yes, we're back in Edinburgh. So we need to just kind of get people caught up on what we've been doing. The last time we talked, we were headed off the next day to New Lanark.
Yes.
But we have to talk about what we did on the way. We stopped at Doane Castle.
The place of where Outlander is filmed. Some parts of it are. And Monty Python.
Yes, Monty Python and the Holy Grail was filmed there. So that was actually, and it's really funny, Terry Jones does the narration on the audio guide, and it's very good.
Yes. And when you go further forward, they were talking about actual scenes and what they did on a very low budget to make the castle work.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that was really fun. It was
freezing cold,
but a really fun castle to see. So we saw that, and then we had lunch. We went to a place called the Jam Jar that had been recommended to us. So we went there and had lunch, and that was interesting.
Yes.
We didn't love it, but it was interesting.
Yes.
It wasn't the restaurant, it's what we chose.
Yes.
Right. Anyway, and then after that, then we drove to the Falkirk Wheel.
Yes.
And that was interesting. I didn't fully, I knew it was a lock to move boats from the 2 levels of water, but when I got there, I got a little unsure. We both got a little unsure that we thought maybe it was just
an amusement
park ride. It was a little unsure, and then we learned more about it, that it actually is a way to move boats from the 2 levels of canals.
Right. The Tay and the Clyde. I might be getting those wrong.
Yeah, I can't remember now, but what we learned, and then we got kind of excited about this, is that there's a whole system of canals in Scotland that had been in disrepair, and they've put a lot of money into repairing the locks.
The Scottish Canal.
I'm sorry, the canals, yes. And
there's a whole society around it.
Yeah.
It keeps them running, and the Falkirk Wheel is their big attraction.
Mm-hmm. It's the big attraction, and if you can imagine, it's like a Ferris wheel, but instead of having a whole bunch of little seats on it, it has 2, kind of, that are opposite each other, and then the boats sail onto this sort of box, kind of, and then they close one end of it, and then it lifts the boat 100 feet in the air. Is that how far?
At least
100 feet in the air. It turns, it rotates, and so one box of water goes down, and the other box of water with the boat goes up to the top, and then there's a like an aqueduct kind of water that then you can sail across. It's not super long, and then you go through a tunnel, and then you come out to the other side, which is another canal.
That connects to locks.
Yes, it connects to a sort of traditional set of locks that takes you up to the next level. So it was really interesting, and this is apparently a very popular way for Scottish people to spend a holiday, is just navigating the locks. And we saw
canal boats?
Yeah, canal boats that long and skinny, and they look pretty posh. Some of them look pretty nice. They have several bedrooms, several bathrooms on board, and so you can rent them. So Kim and I were sort of looking online to see how much it would cost to rent a canal boat.
Well, and what's interesting about the canals is that they're very shallow, like 4 to 5 feet shallow.
Like 5
feet. They don't have a lot of life preservers because the water's not very deep.
Right. But what I thought was amazing about those canal boats, if you rent one, they give you a 30-minute lesson on how to run it, and then they set you free. Anyway, so that was really interesting. The Falkirk Wheel was actually kind of fun. And then the other thing that we wanted to see was
The Kelpies.
The Kelpies. And we just saw it on the map and we're like, what is the Kelpies? Anyway, they are huge, again, 100-foot high metal horses, horse heads kind of, that are coming up out of the ground. And
next to the motorway.
Yes. So anyway, it was so funny because the guide said to us, because we should say too that we went up in the Falkirk wheel. We took the tour boat that puts you onto the wheel, takes you to the top, you go to the next level. But anyway, the tour guide said, oh yes, you can walk to the Kelpies. It's about a 4-mile walk. Well, we still had the rental car, so we decided we were going to drive there. And our navigation was getting a little wonky, I think. And we drove and we drove and we drove. How long did we drive? I'm like, this does not seem right. We've driven so far. We'd driven more than 4 miles.
Yes.
So finally, we'd sort of half given up on the Kelpies, and we decided we were going to pull over and reset the navigation to get to our hotel, when all of a sudden I said, there they are! They're right by the freeway. Not that there's any freeways really in Scotland, but they're right by the highway.
Yes.
So we then pulled off and we figured out how to get into the parking lot, but then you had to walk from the parking lot quite a distance to actually get up close to the Kelpies, and it was getting dusk. Kim was doing all the driving, and you didn't really, and I understand we did not want to drive if it was pitch black dark. Yeah. So we ditched the Kelpies, and we just have a picture of them from the parking lot. And we headed to our hotel. So now this is the big adventure. We went to New Lanark. There's a town called Lanark, and there's another little section called New Lanark, which is a World Heritage Site. It's the home of the Lanark Mill.
Yes.
And
wool mill.
Wool mill. And it was started in 1805.
I think it started in 1800.
1800.
And it was a planned community where people who worked there could live on site. Mm-hmm. And it was to support approximately 2,000 people.
Right. And it was originally cotton.
Yeah, cotton coming out of the United States.
Out of the United States until Robert Owens was the owner of the mill, and then they were telling us that he decided that the cotton coming out of the United States was too yellow. Mm-hmm. And so he started getting cotton from another part of the world, and we cannot remember now.
He called it New Orleans cotton.
Yes.
But it wasn't from New Orleans per se.
No.
It was probably someplace in the Caribbean.
Yeah, we think it was like the West Indies or something, I think. But anyway, so he provided housing for people, low-cost rent. He had a store on site, and the food was actually less expensive to buy your food there than it was to go into Lanark. There was washing facilities. There's a doctor was available, and that was provided free of charge, I believe. Mm-hmm. Mothers stayed home with their children until they were 18 months, and then they went to a daycare. We call it daycare now, but
preschool or something.
Yeah, and then they had like several levels. So there's like from 18 months to 2, they went to one type of care. Then from 2 to 4, they went to preschool or some other kind of care. Kindergarten kind of thing. And then from 6 to 10, they were in school. And then at age 10, they went to work in the mill.
Yeah, if the families could afford it, then they could. There were 2 more years of school.
Right.
But it kind of depended on the family's situation.
Right. If you had to work in a mill, this is the mill that you wanted to work in, because you were paid fairly well, but you had all these other benefits. But it also was a way to keep your workforce there.
Happy.
Yeah, happy and sort of there. And they did talk about the school that the children learned to read and write, but they were not taught mathematics because the Robert Owens wanted them to be
happy with their
lot, but he didn't want them to learn too much so they would realize their situation and perhaps move on.
So, and didn't they also learn psychology?
Yeah.
There's a thing, it was about moral character. If you had
there was like the Institute of Character Development or something like that, and we may not have that exactly right, where it was he would lecture them on goodness and good moral character and whatnot.
And cleanliness, and they got little colored blocks on, if they were a good worker with a clean house, or if things were...
Well, one of the things that... So we did that. We just walked through the visitor center, and we went and looked at the working spinning equipment. But then we went back and had a tour, which was really fun because we got to see some of the stuff that people just walking in couldn't see.
So we wore our knitwear. And when we were in there buying our tickets, the person leading the tour said, would you like a special textile?
Yeah.
And we said, yes.
Yes. So we got to see sort of the back rooms. But which we'll talk more about, but she also said, too, that if your house was clean, that Robert Owens would give them a flower pot with a plant in it. And so they'd have that in their window. And so everybody wanted to get one of these pots. So it was a way of making people work hard with this little cube that would hang over their workstation with different colors depending on if they were doing a good job or not doing a good job. And then this flower pot that you could put in your window. We then took a break. We had lunch. And then we went to the gift shop and we looked at the yarn because this mill has gone through different transformations. It was a cotton mill, and then it was
jute.
It was weaving. It was spinning jute. It was also for a while making
netting, or the circus,
yes,
ropes and
that type of thing. And then in I think it was like '68, it went out of business.
Yeah,
and it was derelict for until the mid '70s, I think.
Yeah.
And they'd actually sold the land, or not the land, but they'd sold the rights for someone to take all the metalwork out of the buildings, the original buildings. And so they, in the mid to late 70s, they decided to try and restore all of this, and they made it into so it's a working mill, but they are no longer spinning cotton; they're now spinning wool. There's a hotel there. There's a youth hostel. Restaurants. There's some sort of health club there. There's also what they called social housing, and it was basically at subsidized rent, or what we call low-income housing. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. So then we took the tour of the mill and saw everything from the fiber coming into the mill. It's interesting that they have it washed off-site. And dyed off-site. And they wash it off-site and remove all the lanolin. Because the discussion on the tour was that lanolin, in some ways, is more valuable than the wool. Because the lanolin is needed for the cosmetic industry. And so they remove all the lanolin. The washed wool is then dyed and then brought back to New Lanark, where they then mix in vegetable oil. Because they need to have some oil in the fiber to run it through the mills. And then they showed us the carding machine down in the
lower level,
the lowest level, and it's huge.
Yeah,
probably 30 feet long. 4
cars. I'm just trying to think of, could you fit 4 cars end to end?
Probably.
Yeah.
Some gentleman named Robert was maintaining them. We never saw Robert. We just heard his voice coming out.
A disembodied
yes,
Robert.
A disembodied voice coming from the machinery. The tour was really interesting. She also took us through Robert Owens' house. Oh, no, we did that on our own. Mm-hmm. She didn't take us that through, but she took us through one of the workers' cottages.
We also went to the special room. It was off of where they were doing the spindles, mm-hmm. and it was plying, wasn't that what she was plying, and so we could see the yarn that was in the big spools, and they were making it from single ply to double ply to triple ply to 4.
Yes, and she was saying that they spin up singles. And then as the demand for it, they either do 2-ply, which is DK, 3-ply becomes Aran, or we would call worsted, but Aran, and 4-ply becomes chunky. Mm-hmm. And so they just spin up all these singles, and then as needed, they spin this other yarn.
And they either put it into hanks, or they deliver it in the big cones. It kind of depends because they don't just sell hanks of yarn. There were lots of blankets and socks that were produced from New Lanark wool, but they were manufactured someplace else.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Then we were done. We just hung out at the hotel and had dinner.
Some ice cream.
Oh yeah, they also make ice cream. So we had ice cream, and then I think we went and had a drink and had dinner. So and then the next morning
the next morning. Well, so we should say we went, before we had our ice cream, we perused through the wool and got all the measurements and started thinking about, what would we do out of this wool? And they were reshuffling it, and so the new things seemed to be appearing that we hadn't seen the first time through. So we got our plan of attack together the night before.
And we attacked the next morning. Should we tell them what we bought?
Okay.
Well, you start.
Okay, so one of the things that I really liked was they had a new wool and silk blend that is just beautiful colors. And a lot of it was just slubs of the silk. So I got a charcoal black with a kind of a melon orange slub in it. And so I know that I want to make a pullover out of it. So
you got DK weight.
I got DK because I prefer to wear DK.
Yeah. And then, because I have no self-control, I ended up buying 2 sweater quantities worth of the DK. One in sort of a bright blue that I'm going to make my brother a sweater. And then I got a sweater quantity for myself, kind of an aqua.
It's a really nice pale aqua, though. It's not bright. It's a pale. It's something that you wear often.
Yeah, it's very pretty. And mine is, now Mark's is 100% wool. Mine is also wool and silk. And then this is the part that, because I cannot, and Kelly is listening to this, she will completely understand, coned yarn.
Big coned yarn. So not just the bundle. Big.
It's 1,000 grams. 1,050 grams, I think. It's huge. So I bought that in kind of a beautiful chocolatey brown espresso bean kind of. And I got that. That's worsted weight. We had to break out the duffel bag to get all this stuff in. And then we checked out of the hotel and we went to Craignethan Castle, which that was an experience because we were driving all through the countryside and we finally get to it, but the gate is locked. We can't drive to it. So we decided just to park on the road and we walked to it. It was a kilometer to the parking lot.
I think it was longer than that.
Okay, well, it said a kilometer,
I know,
it seemed long because it was so cold and windy. But we walked all the way to the castle, but it was not open, which we knew it wasn't going to be open, but we took pictures of it, and it really is sort of in ruins, kind of. We then drove to a town called Biggar and had lunch at Cornhill Castle, and I posted pictures on Instagram, but that's where we saw the wedding.
Yes.
And there's lots and lots of men in kilts and lots of women in very short dresses and very high heels and fascinators, little hats.
Yes. And no sleeves, no shawls.
Yes, it was freezing cold.
Yes.
Yeah, sleeveless dresses and stuff. Anyway, and then they all, after the wedding, they all went out and had pictures taken standing out in that cold. I don't know how they did it. And then we just went and dropped the car off.
Yeah.
And successfully, no damage to
the car. To us, it all went smoothly. We stayed to the left when we should have stayed to the left. It still goes through my head. Stay left.
Yes, and Kim's not going to know what she's going to do when she gets home and back to Seattle and is driving on the right side of the road. You're going to have to say to yourself, stay to the right, stay to the right. Well,
it's interesting because 2 people have warned me that once your brain gets used to driving on the left, it will go through a period of pain trying to drive on the right. So we will see.
Yeah. Anyway, and then we checked into a different hotel. We decided not to stay at we couldn't stay at the Waverly, and we're really glad we couldn't stay at the Waverly because we think that's why we got sick. So we checked into the Apex, which is just a block or 2 down the street, and it's a lovely hotel. And last night, we've discovered in Edinburgh it's very difficult to get into a restaurant on a Friday.
Or Saturday.
Near impossible to get in Friday or Saturday.
Without reservations.
Right, without reservations. So we were on... Kim was on Open Table, and we found a restaurant called Badger.
Badger and Company.
Yes, and we had dinner there. The dinner was good.
Scottish fish pie.
Yes, with this, it said it was a topping of spelt, and this couple sitting next to us, he kept calling it scurry or something like that. Scurry, and I don't know what he was talking about. because the longest time to figure out what he meant. But it's some special topping they put on it that he loves it and his wife hates it or something. But it's a Scottish thing. I don't know. The pie was very good. It was delicious.
Mm-hmm. And it had a spice to it, so it was nice.
Yeah, it was good. But the restaurant was too damn hot.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so hot in there.
Temperature-wise.
And everybody was complaining about how hot it was. So, and then we just went back and collapsed in bed, I think.
Yeah, slept hard.
Because we had to get up the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to take a break, and we'll do dispatch 6. All righty, we'll be back. Okay, we are back with our 6th dispatch. Today, we got up early, and we took the train to Glasgow.
We were there by 9:30.
Yes, we caught the 8:30 train, got there at 9:30, and we planned our day pretty well.
We did do well.
Yeah, we did well. We sort of planned the night before what we're going to do. So we arrived at the station. There's 2 stations, which is they're right next to each other, but we went to Queen Street. Yeah, Queen Street Station, and got off the train and went directly to one of the city tour buses, and got off at the first stop, I think, which was Glasgow Cathedral.
Yes.
And we took a tour of that, and that was beautiful inside.
Well, it's a self-guided tour.
Yeah.
And it was it was like one of the oldest, best kept, because it was one of the few cathedrals that didn't get disassembled during the Reformation.
Right.
So it's pre-Reformation. Mm-hmm. And it was just the stained glass windows were extraordinary, and the nave was wonderful.
And today was really sunny.
Yeah.
So we went in there, and the sun was just streaming in those stained glass windows. It was beautiful. And then we got back on the bus and got off at Byer Street. We wanted to go there because we had read about a yarn shop called the Yarn Cake. So we walked the length of Byer Street to... It
went to Queen Margaret.
That's right, Queen Margaret.
From the Botanical Gardens.
Yes. Anyway, it's called the Yarn Cake, and she, just like it sounds, she sells yarn and cake. So...
And she makes the cake.
Yeah. So we went in there and we had a piece of cake, which was good, and we bought some yarn. Mm-hmm. I bought a Shetland yarn, which was kind of interesting. It's Shetland, but it's really soft.
It is soft. It's a nice worsted weight.
Yeah.
Shetland.
Kim, what did you buy?
I bought something called Exquisite, and it's a UK yarn that it is from sheep in the Falkland Islands, and then it's mulberry silk. Mm-hmm. And it's processed in, I think, southern England.
Yeah.
So, and I just really like the deep color of fuchsia.
Well, and you were going to buy just the fuchsia.
Yes.
And then she's a good saleswoman because she said that she had a customer who had also bought the gray to pair with it to make a shawl. So,
I agreed.
You agreed, yeah. So that was really fun, and she's very engaging. And
she had an interesting shop. It was about half of Drops yarn, and then the other half of UK-specific breeds and unique UK yarns.
Yeah. So then after that, we took a taxi over to the Macintosh House, which is Charles Rennie Macintosh's house, and it's on the University of Glasgow campus.
It's a reproduction of this house, and it's funny because we were walking up the street, and we're like, why is that door in the middle of that wall of that Hunter, I can't remember the name of the gallery, but Hunter Drin gallery.
It's a door that's like 25 feet in the air.
Yes.
That just, what's going on with that door? And well, then we figured out what was going on with the door, because that was this reproduction of their house.
Inside this gallery.
Mm-hmm. So it's the living room, dining room.
Well, the study and drawing room were all one room.
Yeah. And very interesting because those rooms were built in
1903,
something like that, and they're very white, wall-to-wall carpeting, white wall-to-wall carpeting, white walls, white drapes,
white painted furniture.
Very interesting and unusual. And then the bedroom, everything was white.
Yes.
White carpet, white walls, white furniture, white
bedspreads. The fireplace.
Yeah, everything was white. And it was so interesting because this is what you see in design magazines now is white bedrooms, white living rooms. So it was just really interesting to see. And then they also had then another room was just a collection of his furniture, and his wife, Margaret McDonald, was an interior decorator and artist in her own right. Mm-hmm. And then her sister, Frances.
They were called the Glasgow Four.
Yes, and McNair. Okay.
McNair.
Okay. And her husband,
Herbert,
the four of them were very artistic. And
they all met at the Glasgow School of Art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was interesting just to see they had their some of their works there too. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting.
What I thought was interesting is that they integrated a lot of stained glass into the furniture and a curtain rod, and the light fixtures were just very advanced, or just they were spinning out of the Art Nouveau movement, and were really influenced by Japanese design. So there was a simplicity, and it makes sense for a lot of the chairs and the lines of the furniture were
Well, really it was interesting because some of the lines were very sort of square and hard-edged, and then some things were quite rounded and organic. There was and that would be even on one piece they would have some of that.
And they're famous for their roses. They were botanical watercolorists and really had a thing going for flower motifs within their furniture and within silkscreen pieces that were on like the backs of chairs.
And they'd done so many designs. Like Macintosh had done a banner for an exposition. He did book covers. We decided we need to read more about him. Yeah. And her too.
Yeah.
Margaret, because she was.
It looks like she did a fair amount of textiles, but they just had a few examples there.
Yeah. So after the museum, then we ran. We saw the bus, and we ran to catch our city tour bus, got on the bus, and finished the tour, and got off on Buchanan Street, or near Buchanan Street. And then at that point, we just needed something. We needed to sit down and have a drink is what we really needed. And so we were looking for a pub, but everything was packed. We couldn't get into anything. And so Kim had the great idea of going into House of Fraser.
A department store.
It's a department store. And because she said they have, oftentimes, they have like a tea room or food. So we went in there. Well, they have something better than a tea room. They have a gin room.
I think it was called 71 Gins.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, we did not realize, but Scotland has a reputation for making gin. We thought it was just whiskeys, but it's also gin. So you go in there, and the menu is something because you go and you have to pick your gin, and they have them divided up into categories. There are like 7 or 8 different categories.
Yeah, around the world, Scottish gin, citrus, floral,
spicy.
Yeah.
So you have to pick your gin, then you have to pick your mixer.
Your tonic or yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be tonic, and then sort of like some almost like lemonades, kind of. That's So then you'd pick your mixer, and then you could pick your garnish. And so then they had suggestions, but then you had to go and you had to read about all the gins. There was a little write up on every single gin, and it took us 20 minutes to order.
And then it was entertaining.
Yeah, it was very entertaining. And so then they arrived, and they're in these beautiful glasses. Sort of, they're pressed glasses, but were beautiful pressed glasses that look sort of like they were cut glass, but they were pressed glass.
Yeah.
But I think it made the gin taste that much better. So we just sat there and each had one of these drinks, and we were feeling a lot better.
Yes. We
were feeling much better because we just needed to sit down.
And not in a noisy pub.
Yeah. We were sitting there, and we ended up talking to it was a mother and daughter that were there on their second gin, I think.
Yes.
We started talking, and part of the reason we went up there, too, is we wanted to have a drink, but we also wanted to see if we could get some internet connection to look for a place to eat, to make a dinner reservation, or find some place in Glasgow, or just take the train back to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't get internet, but we
were in a shopping district, which was kind of closing down.
Yeah, and also it got kind of a little bit of a weird vibe down there too, because there's a lot of drunk people. But anyway, this mother and daughters talked about this place called the Dome, which is in Edinburgh, which was very near where we were staying at the Waverly Hotel and very near where we're staying tonight. So we
braved it.
We braved it. We decided that we were going to take the train back. Took the train back and decided to go over there and have a drink. We stopped at a couple, then we kind of changed our mind. We went into a couple of pubs too.
And they were just packed.
Packed and hot and terrible. So we went over to the Dome, and it is the funniest thing because it's in an old bank. We think it's a Swiss bank, and it actually has this huge dome that's lit. Fantastic floral arrangements.
Yes, huge.
And
like 6 feet across, kind of.
Yeah, huge. And then, but the funniest thing is, it's like we're kind of like the riffraff, because the people who just go in to get. So this huge giant room, and probably 3/4 of it is the restaurant where people are dining, and it was booked. Couldn't get a reservation. But then there's like these velvet ropes that keeps everybody who's just in the bar out from the dining area. So, but you're all in the same room. So there's all these people standing, up against the velvet rope. But you go up to the bar, and we got a drink. We elbowed our way to the bar, got a drink, and then stood around for a while. And finally, a couple got up and left and offered us the table. Yes. So we sat at the table, and then it was kind of fun because we just sat there and watched people and had our drink and got internet connection, and
it was fun. It
was fun just to see, because now we've been to the Dome because we've had a couple recommendations that we had to go to the Dome.
Well, you were a little concerned that it was going to be all old people.
Yes.
And it was all kinds of people there.
All kinds of people. Young
all
people
ages.
And old people, all ages. So apparently it's the place to go in Edinburgh.
It's elegant. It's, over-the-top decorations.
Yeah.
Kind of reminded me of a classy Las Vegas look.
Yeah. So we just had drinks there, and then we came back to our hotel and
had dinner.
Had a little something in the bar. And now we're just crashed out.
Yep.
So we are checking out of the hotel tomorrow and taking the train to London for our last
5 hours of knitting on the train.
I know. We had today's train ride was an hour each way. This morning, that hour on the train was really relaxing. So I am really looking forward to tomorrow. 5 hours on the train.
Signing off.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit 2usfiberadventures.com. We have links for iTunes, Google Play Music, YouTube, and others.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am Better in Motion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the 2 U's
doing our part for World Fleece.